I'm joined by Brent, the head risk manager down at DSI Sportsbook for this week's version of the Odds Report. Brent, how's it going, man?
Going well. It's going well. I mean, it's busy time of year, put it that way, and it's a good thing. I mean, idle hands make devils work. But yeah, even college basketball being here, at least it's there are no lulls and no dull periods anymore, which keeps the days passing by faster.
I don't know if we've ever talked about it. You're a college basketball fan, right?
No, we haven't actually, but no, I'm not either. Yeah, no, I just don't like. Actually, Kentucky got beat the other day, right? Evansville. They were like a 20
Evansville.
Point, yeah, 25-point favorite. They lost at home. There, that's my contribution to your college basketball segment.
As a born Canadian and now a Costa Rican, do you even know what state Evansville's in?
Yes.
Okay.
The state of Washington.
No, but good try though. Evansville, Indiana, sir.
But there is an Evansville in Washington.
I'm sure there is. There's a Cleveland in Tennessee, but people only talk about the one in Ohio. So
really,
yeah, you're probably right. I guess we'll go to the Jeopardy judges on that one, even though you didn't answer the
reason I know that because even though I do dislike college basketball, I do enjoy basketball itself, and I do enjoy playing the game. And the reason I know that there is Evansville in the state of Washington is because every summer the team would go down there for a basketball camp. They have a pretty well-known basketball camp there. So even us from Canada came down there for the basketball camp. So thus I know Evansville, Washington.
There you go. Are you a pretty good basketball player?
No.
Were you a pretty good basketball player?
In much of everything I was slow, but I could shoot. I could, if you left me alone in 3-point range, I was pretty good. If I had to go inside or run up and down, I was not good.
All right, fair enough. Well, I know you've been doing a lot of running up and down here with the board for the college football card as well as the NFL card. A lot of stuff for us to get to here on today's segment. And we start on Friday night. We haven't had too many Friday night games to discuss here on the segments, but we've got one this week. Game 315, 316, Louisiana Tech and Marshall. What's up here, man?
Yeah, I mean, a whole lot of moving going on this game. And, I got bet by sharp money on Marshall at 2.5. Let's get that out of the way. And it's tough. Like when you get hit at a number like 2.5 below 3, obviously 3 being, a key number, even in college football, you have to respect the 3 and the 7. But I got bet on Marshall at 2.5. So, I mean, right away you're up to 3. Ideally, you kind of want to sit on 3 as much as you can, maybe go 3 minus 15. I try not to use like 3 minus 20 and stuff like that on a more minor game like this one is. But I mean, you kind of just have to follow the market and watch the board, and everyone kind of blew past the 3 and into the 3.5 and all the way up to 5 where we are right now. So this number is, taking a real turn, kind of, people pointing at us and saying, hey, look, you got this one wrong. So you kind of take it on the chin and try and balance as best you can around 4.5 and 5, which is where we're at right now. My count actually isn't that bad on this game. I mean, it's not a heavily bet game, even though this game is on Friday. It's interesting though. I mean, you got Marshall at 6-3, and Lou Tech, I think, is like 8-1. I think they're like a one-loss team, and their only loss was opening week at Texas. So, but then again, I mean, you're talking about a team who's beating up on UMass and Rice and UTEP. No disrespect to those teams, but Marshall minus 2.5 is where that sharp money came. They're 6-3 with decent losses, if you will, if you can have decent losses to Cincinnati and Boise State. So they've played some decent competition, and they are at home. I guess that probably has something to do with it, of course.
Well, and also some rumors coming out here on Thursday afternoon that Louisiana Tech has some suspensions coming down the pike, including quarterback Jamar Smith, which would necessitate a pretty big move in this game. So somebody must have found out about this one, kind of drove this number up a little bit. And I presume we'll have piggybackers that come in once that news is made public, if that news is made public. So I don't think you got the number wrong. I think you just maybe got beaten to the punch with some of the news that was out there.
Yeah, I mean, even where I am at 4.5 and 5, it's pretty much balanced since I've been there. So I'm if you kind of take it on the chin at 2.5 or even at 3 is where your first hits come, and you balance things off at the rest of it. You kind of end up being up okay if you can balance it, say 4.5 and 5, and let that money take care of it. Use some of your juice to cover the hit you got at 2.5 if Marshall does end up covering this one.
All right, so we go to Saturday here. We go to a noon kickoff in Happy Valley, game 325, 326. Indiana, Penn State, side and total sharp action here.
Yeah, and I mean, Indiana obviously is decent so far this season, 7-2. Penn State 8-1, of course, and they lost. Was it last week? Yeah, last week we actually had sharp money on Penn State. They laid an egg, losing to Minnesota last week, but lo and behold, I still have sharp money once again on Penn State. This time they laid the 13.5. And again, I mean, yeah, we went through 14. I mean, is 14, you want to think of it as a key number, but really, especially in college football, but even in the NFL, it's not a number that you really concern yourself with too much. So we have gone from 13.5 all the way up to 14.5 where we are right now. Sharp money came on Penn State, and I mean, related or not to that is sharp money on the over as well. So I have a sharp favorite and sharp over here play here. The over came at 51. I'm at 54.5 right now. I think a couple of books did touch 55. I'm sitting at 54.5 right now. My count just very slightly towards the over. On the side, I actually, kind of, in a good spot. And then I've got not a glaring sharp and public split, but I do have more bets on Indiana. I've got a count of about 2-1 favoring them. And I think maybe, there is like a slight correlation between Penn State and the over here, just because, when Indiana did lose, they've lost twice so far this year. They gave up the 51 to Ohio State, which, I mean, I'm obviously no harm, and it's not such a bad thing giving up that to Ohio State, because they look such a superior team. But they also lost to Michigan State and gave up 40 in that case as well. So they lost to Michigan State, gave up 40 points. You're kind of looking at, well, if they're going to get beat, they might give up a whole lot of points. So I guess there could be a correlation between the two here.
All right, so we jump down to the Pac-12 game 349, 350, UCLA and Utah. We've seen this a lot here this year with a big spread and a total coming down, and that's the case here in this game.
Yeah, and a case, I mean, too, with Utah, they do have a reputation of a very strong defense. I think it's just kind of historically the way they win games, and they've been very strong, obviously, against teams they're supposed to beat. They do quite well in that spot, shutting down opponents who they're supposed to beat. UCLA, 4-5, not bad. They have won 3 straight, but after starting 1-5 on the season, sharp money that came in on this one, of course, on the total we're talking about was the under 54. We're down to 52 right now. I have seen 51.5 on the board, so we could kind of drop down to where they are, but right now at 52, I'm kind of doing all right. Not a ton of action on the total, but I slight count towards the over, but not a whole lot. It's not what I'm going to call a sharp and public split by any means, but I got a slight tick towards the over. That's why I'm sitting at 52 and haven't gone to 51.5 yet, but it is kind of trending downward even further. Under 54 is where the sharp money came in here.
What about the side? I mean, obviously it's gone up a little bit, but that doesn't really seem to suggest too much of the sharp variety on the side.
No, I mean, I'm pretty much balanced here actually when I'm looking at it on the side. Slightly more money, if you will, towards UCLA, but not a lot by any means. Like, it's not even 2-1, but it's trending towards 2-1. This number has actually gone up as well. It did open as low as 20. I opened at 20.5 where I got my first bets on Utah, and since at 21 and even at 21.5, it's kind of been coming back towards UCLA. So it might go back down to 21. That wouldn't surprise me at all, but I don't have sharp money either way on the spread.
All right, we go to the Mountain West, game 354, Wyoming and Utah State. And last week, man, Boise State took a ton of money against Wyoming, and they went to overtime with the Cowboys, and Boise State comes away with a 3-point win. But it seems like this week the situation's flipped a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned that one last week. I don't know if that's part of the, the carryover in terms of the backing of Wyoming, but I do have sharp money there. +7, -115 is where that came in. My count is pretty much even on this one, but it has gone, just constantly. This number just keeps on ticking down. At 5.5 right now. I've even seen some 5s on the board as well. So this one seems to be just continually being bet on the Wyoming side. The sharp money, like I said, was +7.5, -115. Since I've gone, down like even at 6.5, it pretty much balanced. So it's a case where you kind of follow the market at this point. At 5.5, I'm kind of dead even in terms of my wager count. I had slightly more on Wyoming at +6. So once I got that sharp hit and the count being balanced since then, I just kind of been following the board. Again, I don't know if the kind of a carryover effect with how tough they played Boise State, losing by 3 last week, but they have the road dog getting support here +7. Like I said, Utah State's down to 5.5 right now.
Well, and we have seen the market fade Utah State quite a few times this season too, and it almost seems like these things kind of go in like 3 and 4 week intervals where, Louisville's another example where Louisville took sharp money probably 3 weeks in a row, didn't take sharp money against Miami. Should have been an easy sign for all of us. Miami wins that game in blowout fashion. It seems like you kind of get like a 3 to 4 week period of one team getting pretty consistent sharp money, and then the adjustment happens, and then they kind of back off a little bit.
Yeah, and you see that year over year. I mean, even in NFL, there's just certain things where whether it's, a certain team or just certain numbers that just, so oftentimes, especially this game and the gambling side of things is so driven by analytics and stuff like that as well nowadays, that you'll look at teams and situations where the numbers just don't support what they're doing. Even though this event keeps on happening, this result keeps happening, the numbers just don't support it. So you're betting it based on it going the other way.
All right, so we go to the Big 12 here, and this is a big game in the Big 12 game. 381, 382, Oklahoma and Baylor. And you and I were talking a little bit before we started recording here, Brent, and you were kind of surprised by what's going on in this game.
Well, I was hoping, I don't know what I was thinking, hoping that you were going to shed some light on this for me, Adam, but a whole lot of, I don't know side of you kind of, didn't add a lot of value to that conversation. But yeah, I just, you keep, there's that old saying, keep it simple, stupid, something like that, where it just like, you just look at this situation here with Oklahoma on the road at Baylor, Oklahoma 8-1, Baylor 9-0. Now Oklahoma is rated 10, I think, right now, and Baylor 13, so 3 spots separating them. But I mean, Baylor's beaten, they won at Kansas State. They beat Oklahoma State. Oklahoma lost to Kansas State, and yet here we have Oklahoma opening as a 9-point favorite. Got bet by sharp money at -9, so that was the play here. That's the why we're talking about this game in particular. So Oklahoma -9 is sharp, and this number is all the way up to 10.5, and it's like, my count is pretty much even. So I kind of expected that I'd be getting more Baylor money, at least from the public side, but that really hasn't come. I mean, Baylor, like I said, they've played and beat Kansas State. They beat Oklahoma State. They've got Texas next week, so obviously you got a lot of top opponents that they're going up against, and here they are, like I say, at home getting double digits. But sharp money, I guess, knows better than you and I, Adam, and like I said, that came in on Oklahoma -9.
Well, I mean, I gotta save something for the show, right? I can't tell you everything before we actually start recording here.
So here it comes.
Right, when you look at a lot of sharp movement that's out there in the marketplace, I'm not saying this for you, I'm saying this for the benefit of the listeners, but you mentioned the stats angles and the analytics, and it's the quant crowd that really jumps in early in the week. Oklahoma, even with the perception of their defense here this year, their yards per play differential on offense and defense is almost 4 yards per play. They're 1.5 yards better in yards per play on offense than anybody else in the country. So I think that's the driving force here behind this line move, is that the analytics crowd, the quant crowd that gets in early, is saying this Oklahoma team, 4 yards per play better on offense, than defense. And that's because their offense is absolutely elite. It's one of the best in the country. It's one of the best we've ever seen on a per play standpoint. So you see that. I think we get some Baylor buyback here before kickoff. I'm just not sure when that happens.
Yeah, I'm actually getting, I've got, Baylor buyers in house for sure. So my count's not that bad at all. It's pretty much even. So I'm in a good spot in terms of my wager count and the way things are going. Yeah, I took that early hit at -9. Yeah, I've crossed 10, but I'm not really too worried about the fact that I've gone across 10. Like I said, the key numbers in college football are kind of less relevant, and I kind of only really pay attention or try and hold on to numbers like 3 and 7. So the fact that it's crossed, from 9 all the way, past 10 and 10.5 where we are right now is not a big deal. I definitely do have Baylor buyers, like I said, so I am getting money back to if I sit here the way we are, which I think is the way it's going to be, I think we're just going to be bouncing between 10.5 and 10 perhaps until Saturday.
Well, and also to a degree, there's a correlation between the size of the line move and the total that's on the game, because the higher the total, the more scoring, maybe a little bit more variance in some of those games. So you can go from 9 to 10.5 or 11. If this total was, 45 or something, maybe you do stop at 10 first and see what kind of happens there.
Yeah, I mean, the total pretty much, it's open at 67 and just kind of ticked up to 67.5. I think this kind of market wide, there's nothing but public money going that direction so far. My count on the total is about 4-1 towards the over. But yeah, again, when Oklahoma's involved, that's really not much of a surprise.
All right, so we go down to 399, 400 in the Big Ten, Wisconsin and Nebraska, and looks like it's a pretty one-way set of activity here for this game.
Yeah, this number's moved quite a bit. I think it opened as as low as like around 12 out in the marketplace. I got bet by sharp money at -13, so that's favorite Wisconsin -13. Numbers up to 14.5 right now, so it's pretty consistent across the board. Wisconsin, I mean, they did lose to, I think it was Illinois and Ohio State on back-to-back weeks. They beat Iowa last week, I guess it was, but I think this, Nebraska is one of those teams that's just been consistently bet against this season. They've, they just beat the way they got beat by Minnesota, Indiana, Purdue, and they've lost 4 of the last 5, and including losing those 3 straight. The only win was by 3 at home to Northwestern, who's sitting at 1-8, and just like there's just not a whole lot to like about Nebraska. And I hope 14.5 is going to do it for us in terms of being able to balance off. So I'm sitting between 13, where I got the sharp money, and 14.5, getting money both ways. I hope that's how it turns out for me. Even at 14, I was getting consistent Wisconsin Badger money. At 14.5, it's pretty much evened out into my wager count. So 14.5 seems to be the numbers, the numbers that working in house for me. But 13.5 and 14, it was all Wisconsin money.
So as I look at the odds screen here, both Alabama and LSU in their respective games right in the same area in terms of the board where Wisconsin and Nebraska is. So we're not going to talk about the games involving those two teams, but before we transition over to the NFL, I just wanted to ask, how did that LSU-Alabama game last week end up for you?
It was good. Yeah, no, the result was very good for us. And the big thing for me, I mean, we talked about it on Thursday, that I expected to have like more volume on that game than several of the NFL games, and that was the case. The volume on that game probably exceeded the volume on about half of the NFL games that we took on Sunday. It was just massive, fantastic volume.
And then, of course, it's interesting because it knocks all the, well, temporarily at least, the Alabama futures off the market. It was interesting for the Heisman market too, where it takes, Tua pretty much out of the equation. So that was kind of interesting about that game too.
Yeah, the trickle down effect. We're at the point where with the ratings and stuff like that with the top teams, and now you're looking at all these teams who have one loss, and Minnesota, who has hasn't lost yet so far this season. It kind of puts them in a better spot. Everyone's just kind of like inching a little bit closer. I talked about Oregon. I think it was last week. They're a one-loss team. I believe the only loss was at Auburn very, very early in the season, where they were up by a bunch at halftime, where they lost by 6, I think it was. So they're one of those teams now. They don't have any big marquee teams on deck, so you're probably looking at them finishing with that one loss. And if chips fall right for them, one of these other teams loses another game, who knows, they could inch the way up there, and Utah is pretty much in the same spot as well. So it's really interesting. We talked about last week how the margin of victory might come into play with these bigger favorites, but you also got these teams who are on the fringes, like 5, 6, 7 ranked teams who are with one loss or no losses, who probably going to be trying to roll it up on teams as well.
All right, so we transition over to the NFL side of the market, and this game's off the board, but I just want to touch on it real quickly here. Dallas and Detroit. Man, I don't remember seeing a player of Matt Stafford's magnitude ruled out the morning of the game. That had to be kind of crazy for you.
Yeah, but I mean, what's more crazy to me is that they were even talking about him playing. I mean, I think right now he's listed the injury like on Don Best as like it's a hip injury, but they're talking about how he's got broken bones in his back. And I remember like the previous weeks and stuff, you see him like going in between linebackers and lowering his head and stuff like that. And say what you want about the guy, but man, he's just tough as nails, that guy. I mean, he had like a long streak, I believe, without being out, and he's just a tough football player. But that's probably why it came, down to the morning of the game, because he was probably like, yeah, why sit me out? I haven't before.
I'm just happy my teaser got there, because I had a perfect, through 3 and 7 teaser with the Lions. I'm just happy that one found a way to get there.
It's funny. I had a 4-teamer in that, and they were involved, and I can't even remember what the 14 pieces I had, but I know Detroit was on there, and then I actually won my teaser. It's funny, like we talk about it in house sometimes. Like we all like dabble and put fun bets out there, and it's like, we're calling the bet a teaser. We're telling customers, look, this is really going to look super nice on paper, but you're probably not going to get it. And people bet it anyway. It's just kind of funny, like naming something a teaser that really is a teaser.
That's very true. As we take a look here at game 453, 454, New Orleans and Tampa Bay, the Saints out on the road after a very surprising loss last week, to say the least, against the Atlanta Falcons. What's the story here in this game?
The story, Adam, is I'm going to try and sell you and your listeners on some more Tampa Bay unders. We tried last week and didn't work out, and we're going to try again. Again, we talked earlier about how, analytics and stuff like that, and these quant guys who drive the numbers and stuff like that these days. And, I think my feeling is that when you dig deep into Tampa Bay's numbers, that just don't support the fact that they've had all these games just consistently going over. I mean, I think we're going back, since the Giants on the 22nd. That's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks now where they've been 50 points or higher. I mean, it's just like combined points, and we talked about last week on the show how they had the under on the Arizona Tampa Bay game, and the kind of feeling was that if they avoid giving up the big plays, they'll get that under, and it kind of looked like it was going to go that way. And then Kirk went for a 69-yard touchdown for Arizona. Isabella, I think the receiver, went for like 55 yards. Murray had like a 32-yard run, something like that. And they've kind of, as a Tampa Bay team, they kind of have to avoid giving up those big plays. And you look at, we talked about as well, their defensive front seven is one of the top in the league. They just kind of have a weaker secondary, and that's where they get exposed, and that's what happened last week. So I do have sharp money on this one again. It came at under 51.5. I've got a strong wager count favoring the over, so I got a definite and clear public and sharp split with the public on the over, no surprise, and the sharp money on the under 51.5. And I think if I kind of want to look in and agree with the sharps, I think, what we've seen from Breeze so far, he's just not going deep as much. And if he doesn't go deep like Arizona did last week, he probably cashed this under.
Yeah, it's one, again, I mean, sharp bettors are smarter than I am. I mean, that's why I'm sitting here hosting the show as opposed to, betting for a living. But with Marshawn Lattimore probably out for New Orleans and nobody to cover Mike Evans and probably no one to cover Chris Godwin, I don't think I could step in front of this total. I don't think there's any way I could. But again, like you said, I mean, how long can Tampa Bay keep doing this? And also New Orleans, they've got a ton of skill position talent, but how prolific can that offense be? There's always a method to the madness. Again, they find value wherever they find it. And if it's on Tampa Bay unders, maybe this is the week they get one.
Yeah, well, you could maybe assume that, from the handicap and stuff like that, you're opening Tampa Bay numbers a little bit higher just because, like I said, they've gone 6 or whatever weeks it has been where they've scored over 50 points and sometimes in the 60s combined. So you're getting some really high-scoring games with them, yet the numbers maybe just don't support it. Maybe they're in a spot now where, like I say, with Breeze doesn't really go deep a whole lot more anymore. And their numbers in terms of their front seven and stuff like that kind of support that. And you also have to wonder, I guess, maybe how's New Orleans going to look after that absolute shock loss last week to Atlanta.
All right, so we jump down here to a pretty interesting game. Game 463, 464, Buffalo and Miami. These two teams played in week 6. Buffalo was a 17-point home favorite. Now, on the road, they're just a 6.5-point favorite. What's going on with this game, Brent?
Yeah, this is, Miami has been one of those teams almost since like week 2 or 3, just consistently getting money, and it's mostly been public money in the last couple of weeks. I know there was a couple of spots early in the season where the sharps were on Miami, just getting double-digit value with them. Now they're at home. Sharp money came in on Buffalo minus 5.5, so I'm at 6.5 right now. There are some 6.5 minus 15, so you kind of, when you get early money at a number like 5.5, and then you're up to 6, you're at 6.5. You kind of want to resist touching on 7 because you figure once you hit 7, you want to anchor in there. You don't want to be hitting 7 and then popping back and forth. So I'm still sitting at 6.5. I see some books out there at 6.5 minus 15. So that kind of seems to be where it's going right now. 6.5 with juice. So I might be there. Buffalo has, lost a couple of games. They lost that heartbreaker, I guess, last week at Cleveland. But I mean, their defense has been strong all season long. Yeah, Miami has got life with Fitzpatrick at quarterback, but I mean, I think just generally speaking, they are weak. Generally speaking, they're a weaker team, if you want to call it that. You just talent wise, looking at what they have versus Buffalo, this 5.5 seems to be like some decent value. I don't think this number is going to come back down at all. I think it's probably going to hang just where it is at 6.5, maybe 6.5 with juice. I just don't see this one coming back down at all. Just the numbers just I don't think support it. I am getting a wager count that favors Miami. I count about 2-1. Like I said, they've just been consistently getting money, mostly from public bettors in the last few weeks. Earlier on, like I said, it was sharp money back in Miami, but they haven't really jumped on Miami at all in many, many weeks. So a sharp public count, but not a massive count. But I do have public money on Miami. Sharps the other way on Buffalo.
All right, so we go to game 469, 470. I would say this is the game of the week, although we got two real good ones this week. Houston, Baltimore, one of them. But this is New England and Philadelphia. Both of these teams off of a bye. New England, a 3.5-point road favorite. I get the impression that we're going to wind up with a sharp and public split on this game, too.
Yeah, and I mean, we pretty much always have a massive count favoring New England. And when I talk about the sharp money in this game, which, we'll get into that right away, it was on Philadelphia plus 3.5. You look at the Don Best board right now, almost every single book out there is still at 3.5. So you kind of look at, why are you not, haven't budged down from 3.5 on to 3? And the simple fact is just the wager count favoring the Patriots. It's still, very, very strong. I got a count about 4-1 right now favoring the Patriots. So that's quite a strong count in a game this big between two kind of quote unquote marquee teams. And again, I think the public is going to be behind New England. They've kind of shown that already, just because that's kind of what they do. And the numbers, guys, I think you look at Philadelphia; they're sitting at 5-4, but numbers wise, I mean, it just seems like a decent matchup for them. I mean, New England, they do struggle versus the run. They are coming off their first loss of the season at Baltimore. Their numbers wise, you look at league averages and stuff like that in terms of offensive success rates. I mean, their offense passing wise is just slightly above average. Their rushing offense is just slightly below average. So they're not really, excelling in any particular area. And you look at the Eagles, of course, they've got one of the, top 10 defenses, both versus the rush and versus the pass. So they're solid. And I think if you look at both offensively and defensively at the line of scrimmage, I think they're going to have a whole lot of success. So this is one of those spots where I'm kind of content to sit back and hopefully I can, balance action at 3.5. I don't see myself going any higher for sure. I don't see this number going higher. If anything, it might tick back down to like hit on 3. And if it gets to 3, I can't see it moving off 3. It'll just be like New England -3, -120, or 3 -115 or something to that effect. But there's nothing, I just can't see any situation where we're going to be higher than 3.5 where we are right now. If anything, despite the fact that I've got such a strong wager count the other way, if anything, I could see this one coming down. And come kickoff, if we need the Eagles for, kind of a big route, I'll be happy in that spot.
Yeah, and of course, again, it's very important to use your odds screen to your advantage because as you look out there in the market, as Brent said, most books at 3.5, the ones that are at 4 shouldn't surprise you at all. So again, use those context clues to your advantage out there in terms of the odds screen. One more game in the NFL as we wrap things up here for this segment and for this week on the show. Game 471, 472, Cincinnati and Oakland. This one probably won't surprise anybody.
The real surprise, I think, is the fact that the Oakland Raiders are a double-digit favorite. I mean, going back to last season, you don't think you would ever be in a position where you're going to say that. But I mean, they this game right here, I think they're going to match up really well. And I mean, who doesn't match up well versus the Bengals, of course? Oakland -9 is where the sharp money came. We've gone boom right up to 10. Boom, we're on the 10.5 right now. So sitting at 10.5 here and kind of digging in on this one, and it's real tough because, at 10.5, yeah, I'm starting at two-way action. When I was at 10, it was about 4-1 favoring Oakland. So my count overall is kind of close to, I got, slightly more at the 10.5, but 10.5 seems like to be like, it's the number that it has to be all week long. And it's probably the number that's going to work for us in terms of getting two-way action. Bengals, worst defense in the league. They're just going against what really is an efficient Oakland offense. I think they run the ball probably a little more than people would like to see them, but they're just kind of Gruden being committed to the run as he is. But I think Oakland is basically going to have success versus the run, running the ball and passing the ball. They're kind of going to win this game, however, whichever way they want to. So 10.5, I'm kind of, happy that I'm getting two-way action at 10.5. We kind of found that spot early in the week being Thursday where, okay, this is the number that's working for me in terms of getting two-way action.
I'll tell you this, second time in the last 15 years, the Raiders have been a double-digit favorite. The other time, week 2 in 2017, that was when they were at home to Josh McCown and the New York Jets. They were a 12.5 point or 14.5 point favorite in that game. So as you said, very surprising to see the Raiders a double-digit favorite here in this one. I guess one last question, not a game with any sharp action or anything like that, but Kansas City and the Chargers on Monday night, game in Mexico City. We have, of course, seen the line go up on the total here a little bit, but do these, London, Mexico City type games, do they kind of throw people off a little bit or not really?
Not really, no. I think people, the only thing that kind of throws people off is when they have the London games that are early. Those are it's kind of like the only spot that really has that effect at all. But no, these, being Mexico game, not a big deal at all. The sharper guys might dig in stuff in terms of altitude and stuff like that, in Mexico and what kind of effect that would have. But the general public bettors, no, it doesn't concern them at all.
Brent, once again, the head risk manager down at DSI Sportsbook. The Odds Report, always a great segment, man. I always enjoy it. Thank you so much for joining me, and we'll talk to you again next week.
I appreciate you having me on, Adam. Thank you.